What's up, guys? We are doing a celebration video. 3.5 years ago, I uploaded my very first book review to YouTube. It was on Bag of Bones by Stephen King. And today, we're at 5,000 subscribers. So I appreciate the support, everyone. This channel really does mean the world to me, and I appreciate the comments from everyone. Recently, I asked for some questions. I got 49 responses, and I'm going to answer every single one of those questions. So once again, guys, thank you all very much for the support. You know, I'm chronicling my reading experiences here, and you all have become a part of that, and I really look forward to each video. So let's get to these questions. The very first one comes in from Poncho. He asks, what is the most money you ever paid for a book? You know, I bought a dictionary once that was $50. I don't have it anymore. I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any really special edition books or anything like that. The nicest book I have, I actually only paid $5 for. So I'm going to say that dictionary is probably the most expensive book that I've ever ordered. I'm looking at a copy of Rage by Stephen King. And if I commit to buying one of those, it'll by far be the most expensive book that I've ever purchased. Let's go on to the next one here. Connor asks, if you could live in any fictional Stephen King town, which one would you live in? You know, this is an interesting question. The first thing that comes to mind is Midworld from the Realm of the Dark Tower series. That would probably be my choice. However, I like Castle Rock. You know, Castle Rock seems like a gentle little town where everyone knows one another. That would be a pretty good choice too, I think. Derry is an interesting town, but I think I'm going to go with Midworld with that one, which is the landscape for the Dark Tower series. And other than that, maybe Castle Rock. The next one by Christian says, what are your favorite movies? You know, I'm not big on movies. Strangely enough, I watch about maybe a couple of movies every year. Recently, I watched the first Lord of the Rings movie because I finished The Fellowship of the Ring in book form, and I really liked that one. What's standing out to me as of recent, last year I watched the movie Joker. Just on a whim, I decided I was going to watch a movie. I hadn't seen one in probably a year. And I was impressed by Joker. I was really impressed by that movie. I thought that it was just genius, and I highly recommend that one. And it's got to be one of the best movies I've ever seen. So the first thing that comes to mind with that is Joker. And it's really hard for me to answer that because I just haven't seen very many movies. Other than when I was younger, I watched quite a few. But yeah, I'm going to go with Joker on that one. The next one by Jeffrey asks, how much do I read in a day? You know, it might be surprising because having this channel and having reading goals and everything, you might think I'm reading all the time, but I'm usually reading anywhere from maybe 40 to 70 pages a day. So I might get anywhere from an hour to maybe 90 minutes of reading time in on an average day, which is enough to knock some books out. But you know, I wish I could read all that. I'd probably read hundreds of books every year, but I'm shooting for 60 this year. I'm way behind. I've only finished 7, but I read for probably about an hour a day. Kindle Surprise asks, what did you start reading? Why did you start reading? And how old were you? You know, that's kind of a tough question to ask because it was a long time ago. And I know that I liked children's novels when I was a kid. I liked the Babysitter's Club. I don't know where I got those, but there were several of those that I liked. I liked Goosebumps quite a bit. When it comes to reading adult fiction, I would say that the first adult novel that I ever read that really hooked me as a novel reader was either Desperation by Stephen King, or it was... what's that John Grisham book? A Time to Kill, A Time to Kill. One of those two novels was the first adult novel that I ever read. And I liked both of those. So I would say that those books had quite an influence on me. But I've been a reader ever since I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old, reading those Goosebumps. And there was another one. Actually, I've got one here. I used to like to read these things because I liked Little League Baseball. I played when I was a kid. And I liked these Matt Christopher baseball novels. They're about, I don't know, 100 pages with pictures and stuff in them. But I really liked those. There was like a series of 20 or 30 of those. And I read at least a few of them. So, yeah, I think that Goosebumps was hugely influential. I had the collection. I really liked the matching bindings on those. And as far as adult fiction goes, I would say that it was probably a combination of Desperation by Stephen King and A Time to Kill by John Grisham, both of which I still highly recommend, and both of which I need to reread at some point. Next up, by Angry McMonster, asks me, what are your favorite sci-fi subgenres or tropes? What attracts you to sci-fi books? This one's a tough one for me because I only really started getting into epic fantasy and science fiction, space opera, last year. Last year, I read the whole Revelation Space trilogy by Alastair Reynolds, and I just love that thing. It's a series that I'm still into. And I also read the first Stormlight Archive book by Brandon Sanderson, and I read the second one this year. As far as tropes in sci-fi, I'm just not sure. I haven't read enough of it. I really am restricted, basically, to Alastair Reynolds. I did read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I did read probably another one or two, and that's it. So I'm really not qualified to answer this question. However, I will say that I do love space opera. I like those deep space epics where they're way out in outer space. That's kind of the best kind of escapism. And maybe a trope that I like is a very scientific kind of novel. I like Alastair Reynolds because he's a physicist and these really complex scientific ideas come across. I also want to start this guy. This guy here, I want to try, Peter Hamilton. From what I understand, people that like space opera really like him. But yeah, I'll leave it at that with science fiction. I really want to try Peter F. Hamilton's Pandora's Commonwealth series. The next one from Kostrick, which book do you think has had the biggest impact on you? And of all the characters in the books you have read, which one do you feel that you relate to most? The Dark Tower series by Stephen King has had the biggest impact on me. It's an epic fantasy series. I even have a tattoo of the Eye of the Crimson King. My mind has returned to that series for every day for over 10 years. I think it's been since I read it. And I've read the first installment, The Gunslinger, 4 times. I actually did an in-depth breakdown summary of that video here on the channel earlier this year. And I really like that one. And I think that maybe Roland and I see eye to eye. I like his character. I'm not sure if he's an anti-hero or what he is, but the Dark Tower series is my favorite story of all time. The other two that I could mention then with that would be the Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds and the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson are very influential, but I really liked the Gunslinger and the Dark Tower. The next one, Enormous Little Things, asks, who are your top 5 all-time favorite authors? The first two are obvious to me. It's Stephen King, number 1. Alastair Reynolds is number 2 with that Revelation Space. Man, I really like him. I can't wait to get into Chasm City later this year, which will be a reread for me after nearly 20 years. I hate to say Dean Koontz because I've read about 10 Dean Koontz novels, and I've only really liked about 4 of those. The other 6 I thought were strangely bad, but I guess I would probably say Dean Koontz and Brandon Sanderson. It has to be on there as well. Because his Stormlight Archive has taken me by surprise. He's awfully an expert when it comes to writing. He's a man that writes these 1,000+ page epics that are just filled with suspense and intrigue. Stormlight's up there with the Dark Tower series for me. So if I had to pick another author, that's really a challenge for me. I'm almost inclined to say Anne Rice would be maybe my 5th favorite author. I like her Vampire Chronicles. That's another series that I'm quite partial to. So we'll leave it at that. King, Reynolds, Koontz, Anne Rice, and the other one I mentioned, Brandon Sanderson. I love Sanderson. I think he's going to be making his way up there to compete with Stephen King. As I read more of his books, I'm really blown away that he can keep a book that's 1,000+ pages suspenseful. I really like him, and I highly recommend him for anyone Even if you don't like epic fantasy, try Brandon Sanderson. He's another science fiction author that I want to read as well. Let's go on with the next one. What are your favorite booktubers? And what made you finally take the jump to start your channel? So proud of you and your channel. Well, thank you very much, Dana. I probably decided to make this channel. You know, it can be challenging because many of us that like to read books, whether we be introverts or whatnot, we really don't have anyone to talk about the book with at length anyway. So that's probably why I did this, to reach out over the interwebs, to share my reading experiences with others. And we're finally getting some momentum going now with the 5,000 subscriber thing. I'd love to blow it up. Like Daniel Green is one that I like to watch. You know, I think that he's basically mastered being a media personality that's literary in nature. He has a great channel. I even want to make my bookcase similar to his. He has these lights on his bookcase. I'd love to do mine like that. But Murphy Napier is pretty good. I like her as well. I would probably say those two. There's another woman named Kitty G. Her channel's not quite as big. She reads a lot of fantasy. She's basically like an expert on fantasy literature. And there's so many good people on Booktube now. There are just so many of them. And I watch quite a few of those. Sometimes when I'm getting ready to do a book review and I'm not entirely sure what I want to say, I'll watch a couple other reviewers give their review, and it gives me ideas about what I want to say about what I thought about the book. But I think that Daniel Green is an expert on it, and I really try to learn from him because he's basically, it's a career for him now. I'd love it if I could make reading books my career. Maybe that'll never happen, but I think that Daniel Green does a pretty good job. Yeah, he's an expert. So let's move on to the next one. Oh, and I finally took the jump to start the channel because I didn't have anyone to talk with books about. I actually filmed myself reviewing Bag of Bones by Stephen King just on my phone in vertical mode. It was a pretty poor review. People were still watching it, but you know, I just like being able to talk with other readers. And I like even having people, a man named Michael Knipp. He's a YouTuber that's going to come on Monday evening. I'll be talking with him about the epic fantasy genre. We're going to do an episode here for the program, so keep your eye out for that. Let's keep going here. Freaksta94, what got you into reading? What is your favorite form of reading? Physical books, digital, audio, etc. What is your favorite movie based off of a book? What got me into reading was Goosebumps and the Babysitter's Club. What form of reading is my favorite? You know, I've never used an e-reader. I did read a Sherlock Holmes book off my phone one time. I'm thinking about a Kindle, but I'm someone that just really loves collecting books. You know, I really just love collecting hardbacks. You can see that I've got my own collection going on here, but I'm someone that likes to both read the paperback or the hardback. I like paperbacks the best, probably. For collecting, I like the hardbacks better, but I also like to listen to the audiobook simultaneously. And that's what I'm doing now with the book I'm reading on the Nazi concentration camps. I'm reading a history book that I'm going to be covering here shortly on the program. But I like both reading the text and the audiobook simultaneously. That is how I like to consume. In fact, every time I read a book, that's what I'm doing. I just discovered audiobooks last year. Last year, I started the novel, The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean Auel. And I was about halfway through it. And out of curiosity, I got the audiobook. And you see, I had tried audiobooks a couple times in the past, and I didn't like the fact that the narrator read slower than I would read. It was just, my mind would wander because the person was reading too slow. I didn't realize you could speed the narration up. And that helped a lot. So ever since Clan of the Cave Bear, I've been both reading the text and listening to the audiobook simultaneously. So that's my preferred method of consumption with literature. And another point on that, you know, a lot of people question if audiobooks are real books. And I can see why someone might say that, because if I listen to the audiobook only, I will not have as vivid an experience as if I'm reading the text, right? So that's actually why I like doing both. I like the audiobook because it's almost like it's doing the work for me. I don't even have to think about processing the words or any of that. It's something that's happening to me rather than me engaging in reading the text. However, to make the experience maximally vivid, I just follow along with the text as the audiobook reads. It just works out great for me, and that's the way I like doing it. So every time I buy a book now, I've got to get not only the book, but the audiobook version as well. Next one. Cat 90. You're on a deserted island for a full year. What 3 books would you take with you to pass the time? If I'm on a desert island for a whole year, I'm probably going to want to take 3 long ones. So what's immediately coming to mind is Les Miserables, a book that I've wanted to read for a long time, and because of the length of it, I put it off. Les Miserables would be one that I would take. I would finally have an excuse to read it if I were trapped on a desert island with it. This version here is 1,463 pages. 1,463 pages. I would also take The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a book that I gave up on in the past. I would want to try that one again. And I would take The Stand by Stephen King. I tried to read The Stand by Stephen King years ago, and I didn't make it but about 250 pages through. And as a King reader, as a constant reader, as a Tower junkie, as someone who's becoming a Stephen King expert, I need to go back and finish The Stand. So those are the 3 books I would take. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and I would take The Stand by Stephen King. And if I was there for a whole year, I could probably read those 2 or 3 times each. Where was I now? Okay, let's keep going. Maria asks, what is the longest book that you have read? That would be It by Stephen King. Have you ever tried writing a book? I don't think I have it in me to write a book. I like reading them. I just don't think that I'm imaginative enough to actually write a novel. That would be really challenging. That's why I really admire people like King and Brandon Sanderson that can just keep pumping these imaginative tales out. I have considered writing a short story, and we'll come to that in another question, but I have never tried writing a book. I'm not sure that I could do it. For the life of me, I probably couldn't do it. What is your favorite book? My favorite book is the Dark Tower series, but that doesn't really count because that is a series. I guess I would probably say Hearts in Atlantis by Stephen King, which is an unusual answer. Most people would not say that is their favorite book. It's a compilation of stories by Stephen King. Low Men in Yellow Coats is in there. Hearts in Atlantis is in there. Low Men in Yellow Coats is a Dark Tower side tale novella that's all about the Dark Tower. So I would say my favorite book is probably Hearts in Atlantis by Stephen King. I would love to have a signed copy of that one. What's the most interesting book you have ever read? I'm wondering, for some reason, the first thing that's coming to mind for me with that one is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, which is a very hilarious tale that's based in a true story. It's gonzo fiction, is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's about an attorney, or it's about a writer who takes his attorney out to watch this motorcycle race, and they're using all these drugs and stuff. It's just the craziest damn thing, is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And they made a great movie on it with Johnny Depp too. So I would say it was probably the most interesting novel that I've ever read, just because of how unusual it was. And I highly recommend that one. And at 200 pages, it's not a huge commitment. Okay, so Krypton114 says, yay, 5,000 subs. So underrated. Well, I appreciate that compliment. I would really like to see this channel blow up. We're getting some momentum now. I'd love it if it would just blow up and I could have enough of a foundation to get people like Stephen King and whatnot to come on. And I'm working on some author interviews, so it's a work in progress, but I appreciate the support. Alexander, what book most inspired you to start reading a lot? That would be Desperation by Stephen King and A Time to Kill by John Grisham. Who is your favorite author and why? Stephen King's my favorite author. And what I like about King is that, I was actually wondering recently, is Stephen King the greatest author to ever do it? and as far as writing a novel goes for entertainment purposes. And the only other person I could think that I could put up there with him might be J.K. Rowling because of the Harry Potter thing. Harry Potter is the most successful story that's ever been written outside of like the Bible or something like that. Stephen King has never done anything specifically that was as successful as Harry Potter was. So in that sense, J.K. Rowling is really at the top of skill with writing. That Harry Potter thing is just a phenomenal story. And I started reading it when I was in my 30s, and I really think that it's just sheer genius. And it is. No wonder it's blown up to be the world's greatest story. But however, Stephen King is more versatile than J.K. Rowling. You know, he's written best-selling book after best-selling book after best-selling book about a whole bunch of different shit in a bunch of different genres. And the Dark Tower series is just absolutely genius. So I guess I like King because of how versatile he is. You know, he can write Westerns, he can write fantasies, even an epic fantasy. He can write science fiction and horror and police detective and young adult and children's books. Here's a children's book I read by Stephen King earlier this year. I read it as soon as I got it in the mail. Charlie the Choo Choo. And another thing I like about Stephen King is how this huge web of material is coming together in King's multiverse. This book is a special part of that. You see, this children's book, Charlie the Choo Choo, and it's an evil train. You don't realize it's evil by reading this book, but this book, this very specimen, is inside another book of King's, The Wastelands, the third book in the Dark Tower series. A character encounters this book and reads it, and the entire text of this book, word for word, is in that book. But that's just an example of how King's books come together. He's just this one huge interconnected web of books. And I just love that fact. And that's why Stephen King is my favorite writer. He's just surprised me again and again. Even though there have been some duds in there, probably 2 out of 3 of the books that I've read by King I really enjoyed. Let's keep going here. Felicia sends a compliment. Congrats on 5,000. Your book reviews are fun and insightful, so it's no wonder folks enjoy your channel. Well, thank you very much. Felicia actually sent me a couple of books. Leonardo da Vinci, a biography by Walter Isaacson, and Death Masks, the 5th installment in the Dresden Files series, which I'm reading now. Going to be doing a video coming up, guys, soon on epic fantasy for beginners, so keep your eye out for that. And I'm also going to do a separate one on why I think you should read the Dresden Files now that I'm working through the 5th book in the series. Oh, also, one more question by Alexander. What's my favorite book by my favorite author? That would be Hearts in Atlantis by Stephen King. Dallas, what is your least favorite Stephen King book and why? Also, what is your least favorite Dean Koontz book and why? When it comes to the King thing, there are 2 books that come to mind. Dr. Sleep is one that I couldn't stand. Man, I just pushed through it just so that I could say that I read it. You know, Dr. Sleep is a sequel to The Shining, which is Stephen King's classic ghost story. Maybe the most successful ghost story of all time, other than maybe A Christmas Carol. But The Shining is huge. And when I found out that Dr. Sleep was a sequel to The Shining, I wanted another ghost story. That's what I thought it was going to be. It turned out to be very unusual. I didn't like it. I also disliked The Regulators by Stephen King, which was a sequel to Desperation. I thought we were going to get another take at Desperation, and it was some unusual thing going on, and I just did not like The Regulators. It was one that was painful for me to finish it. Least favorite Dean Koontz book would probably be Twilight Eyes. It's a carnival tale that I stopped reading on page 292. Lisa the Cat Dude, please tell us either your top 5 or top 10 favorite Stephen King short stories. No novellas, just the short stories. Thanks. Well, I'm not sure that I can give you that many, but I'll tell you I like The Man in the Black Suit, which is a short story found in Everything's Eventual. It's about this little boy that's out fishing one day on his own in the woods at a stream. He goes farther than his parents told him that he should go, and he encounters in the woods The Man in the Black Suit. And it's a very interesting Bram Stoker award-winning short story. I also liked The Cat from Hell by Stephen King, which is about a man that hires a hitman to kill his cat, to attempt to kill his cat. It's an evil-ass cat. And I love cats, by the way. So I liked The Cat from Hell. I also liked The Little Sisters of Illyria, which is found in Everything's Eventual. It's a prelude to the Dark Tower series, which I thought was great. I liked Drunken Fireworks in Bazaar of Bad Dreams. It was the only short story in that one that I enjoyed, except for maybe Blockade Billy, which is a short story by Stephen King about a serial killing baseball player that I thought was a great short story. And another one I'll give you is Stephen King's N. Now, this is a short story that I recommend reading. Even if you don't feel like reading a book of Stephen King short stories, find the story N and read it. It's a kind of nested narrative short story that's not even possible for me to describe how unusual this thing is and how it comes together. It really is a work of genius. It's a work of genius, and I highly recommend N by Stephen King. I recommend just getting that and reading it. It's an incredible short story that I think anyone who would read it would agree. Let's keep going here, guys. We're about halfway through. Emily. Emily asks, when did you get into reading books? That would have been Goosebumps when I was a kid. And Stephen King when I was a little bit older. What are my daily reading habits? How do I find time to read? You know, one of my favorite times to read is just first thing in the morning. I find that my mind is most clear first thing in the morning, and I like to make a cup of coffee. I'll start drinking it once my coffee's starting to kick, and I like to just pause and read for about 30 to 45 minutes. That's where I'm getting at least half of my reading done, is in the morning with my coffee. And then I'll work another session or two and later on in the day. But I usually only read in like 25 to 40 minute spurts. And I'm consistent with that every day. So I do get books finished. But first thing in the morning with coffee is my favorite time. Veronica Garcia, which are your favorite foreign writers? What are your favorite foreign books? You know, I'm trying to think, how many foreign writers have I read? You know, I've read some books that were translated, but I'm not sure that anything's coming to mind. J.K. Rowling is foreign to the United States. She's an Englander. I think that she's a great writer. That's really a tough question for him. I'm trying to think. Like, I've wanted to read Russian literature for so long. I've wanted to read Dostoevsky. I do like Stephen Hawking, who is a person who I've read 2 of his books, which he's an Englander. But that's a tough question for me. You know, I guess I read a lot of bestsellers from American authors. I know that Alastair Reynolds, my second favorite author, is an Englander yet again. So I do have a lot of English authors that I read. F.C. Edgigan is a Canadian author that wrote a really good book called Washington Black, which was a book that ethnic prejudice was a huge theme in that one. And it's actually not a bestseller. I recommend that one, Washington Black by S.E. Edgigan. It's an unusual novel with some kind of strange themes in it. I also have a German, let me tell you what this author's name is. The Search for Heinrich Schlegel. So here's a book. Martha Bali is the woman's name, and I imagine that she's German, and I think she is. The Search for Heinrich Schlegel is a time travel novel that's fantastic. It's about a German man that goes to the Canadian wilderness, and somehow he has some weird experience with time. It's a non-best-selling novel that's deserving of being best-selling. So I would recommend that one, The Search for Heinrich Schlegel. I'm sure if I dug through my Goodreads read list, I could probably come up with some more answers, but that's all I've got for that one off the top of my head. Don Marie asks, when is your favorite time to read? And that would be in the morning with coffee. Bad Levi asks, what do I do if I have a reading slump? Congratulations on the 5,000 subscribers. Greetings from the Philippines. You know, this is an interesting question. And I actually am going to be doing a video on how to get through a reading slump. There are a few different things you could do with that. One, I find that if I read nothing but fiction or nothing but nonfiction for an extended period, I can start just getting sick of it. And a way to get out of that rut is to switch it up. If I'm stuck on nonfiction, I'll read a novel. If I'm stuck on reading too many novels, I'll read a piece of nonfiction on a subject that I'm extremely intrigued by. I'll have to find something to pull me out of that rut that is just fascinating to me. And that's what I'll do for that. So I would say switch the genre up, fiction, nonfiction, or in another way. Find something that's particularly intriguing. Sometimes if we're just not interested, you've got to get into a subject that just can't not be interesting for you. And the other thing you can do is just to stop reading for a couple of weeks. It can be painful to try to force yourself through books and you're just not enjoying it. I find that if I'm in a reading slump and I stop for about 2 to 3 weeks, that's usually long enough to get me through that. So let me keep going here, guys. Krypton says, I've been here since 100 subscribers. I appreciate that support. That's been a long time now you've been watching. Which is your favorite 5 movies based on Stephen King books? You know, I just read a few days ago Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. And I remember that I have seen that movie, and I thought that it was quite a good movie. I've seen it more than once. I want to watch the new It movie. I think that that's going to be quite interesting. I know they did it in 2 takes, the It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, or something like that. I really want to watch that. I can't give you top 5 because I just haven't seen that in any Stephen King movies, I don't think. I'm someone who's just now trying to get into watching more movies. But I would probably say The Shawshank Redemption is it. The Green Mile was a great one as well. That's a really, really good one. But I'm going to be rewatching Shawshank Redemption. And I'm going to do a video comparing the book to the movie because I know there are some differences. Even though it's been years since I've seen the movie, I know there's some differences. So I'm looking forward to doing that video soon. Well, let me keep going here. What do you do for a living? How do you have so much time to read? Well, I am in social work for a living, and I actually don't find a whole lot of time to read. Every morning I get up with my coffee. I read for about 45 minutes. Then I'll find about another 30 to 40 minute time period to read throughout the day. And that's it for me. And doing that every damn day, I'm actually getting quite a few books finished. I'm reading a massive book right now. It's a nonfiction book. It's 273,000 word book called KL, A History of the Nazi Concentration Camps by Nicholas Waxman. And he's a university professor. I looked his ass up to see if I could get his email address. I'm going to try to get him to come on the channel and talk with me about that book. No one else has reviewed it. No one else has covered it. But it's an extraordinarily well-written history book on an engrossing and sadistic subject. And I really want to talk to that guy. So I'm going to see, I think because no one else has ever interviewed him about it on YouTube, that I might be able to get him to do it. So keep your eye out for that. Do you consider reading comics and or manga? You know, I have read a couple of comics. I actually did 2 book reviews on comics. A couple of years ago, I read the first Dark Tower comic, which was called The Gunslinger Born, which goes in further on the Dark Tower series, which I think is just a genius idea. And I was quite surprised. Some of the comic books take a while to read. There's a lot of text in those things. It must have took me a couple hours to read that Dark Tower one. And I did another one. I read another one by the physicist Johnson was his name, Clifford Johnson. He wrote a comic book style graphic book, which was all about science and physics and astronomy and all this stuff. And it was just kind of like a scientific comic book. And I thought it was really good, but it also took me probably a few hours to read that one. And I did count those toward my Goodreads goal that year. So I'm not huge on those, but I'm not against reading them either. And I do want to buy and read and own and display all of the Dark Tower ones. So I do want to review all those here on the channel, and I need to commit to doing that soon. All right, let's keep going here. Aside from reading, this is what Salt and Sway asks, aside from reading, what do you like to do? You know, I like to roll Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is something that I started doing about 8 months ago or so. That's a lot of fun. I really like the combative nature of that sport. I'm reading a book on it, actually. It's called Jiu-Jitsu University, which I'm going to review here in the next couple of weeks. I'm actually going to be sending my computer in to have an adjustment made on it. It's probably going to be out a week that's going to be out when that's happening. But after that, I should have that book done by that point. I really like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think I'm going to buy myself an electronic drum kit. I finally convinced myself that I want to give it a try. So that's another hobby that I'd like to start. I've already told myself, though, that I'm not going to allow it to destroy all of my reading time. I will not let that happen, but I'll work it in. Like I said, I only read from an hour to an hour and a half every day. And you can read 50 or 60 books a year like that, no problem, as long as you're consistent with it every day. But I'd like to start drumming as well. I'm going to give it a shot. I tried guitar. I wasn't passionate enough about it. But you see, I'm someone who's always been in like a constant state of anxiety, I think. And I just think that drumming thing is going to work out for me. I actually read an article online by a medical doctor about how drumming can help with anxiety issues. So yeah, jiu-jitsu and a soon-to-be drumming hobby. Next up, Alina asks this one. Love your channel. Your videos make me smile because of how much appreciation for books and reading is in them. Thank you for sharing your content with us. One of my favorite videos by yours is the library tour, which there's going to be more of those coming up soon. We're going to go through the whole nonfiction section, one section at a time. My question is, do you prefer to borrow books from your library or buy to keep in your collection? Do you ever unhaul books from your collection? I only ever did a book unboxing here once. It's called Massive Book Unboxing. If you look that up in the search, you'll find it. A viewer of this program sent me 8 big boxes of books. Many of my Stephen King hardbacks came from that book haul. Over 1,000 people have watched that, I think. And the other one, you know, I like borrowing books from the library. However, I do prefer to buy them. I've bought more than I borrowed since the coronavirus happened. But I do like buying. For about 2 years, I was into this paperback buying stretch, but I've changed it to hardbacks. I really want to get these shelves here filled with just real nice hardbacks. For example, I have my, where are they? They're right there. My Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. I want all those in hardbacks. However, I only have them in paperback. Right there they are. I also want to get my Alastair Reynolds all in hardback. I want my Girl with the Dragon Tattoo all in hardback. I want my Clan of the Cave Bear all in hardback. My Dark Tower all in hardback. I'm working on getting my right there Harry Potter books all in hardback now. And I also would like to have all of these, my Game of Thrones books all in hardback, plus my Vampire Chronicles books. I want them all in hardback. So I do prefer to buy the hardbacks if I can. However, hardbacks cost quite a lot of money. So I do sometimes borrow from the library. I'm actually reading a book now that I borrowed from the library, that concentration camp book. I'm listening to the audiobook that I paid for on Audible and reading the library's copy because it was $40 damn for a new hardback, and I wasn't going to do it. If I had done that, that would have been the most expensive book I ever purchased, other than that dictionary. So let's keep going here, guys. Krypton 114. Would you like to record audiobooks? You know, I did what I would like to do here on the channel, and I'm going to do it within the month. I'm going to do it. I'm going to narrate The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. I'm going to see if I can give an intense, emotional reading of that poem. And I'll drop like some rain in the background trickling down and stuff. We'll see. I've had people tell me that my voice is good for audiobook reading. And I thought on that. You know, it's kind of strange because, you know, if you've ever listened to yourself record it, it sounds different than it sounds to you when you hear yourself talk. But I have considered it. It would be a lot of work to narrate an entire book in a professional manner and clip everything together and get all the mistakes out of there. That would take so many hours to do a whole book. But I'm going to start with a poem, and we'll see if you guys think it's any good or not. So the answer to that question is yes. And I will be narrating my only poem that I like, because I'm not big into poetry. I'm working on getting into poetry, but I'm going to do The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, which many would say is the best poem ever written. Melva Strong asks, do you participate in book discussion groups? You know, I did at the library before COVID hit. I was in a group there with a couple of the librarians, some older folks were in that, and I would go to it. And I wouldn't always read the book, but I'd go anyway just to talk about books. And sometimes I would read the book. You know, we would take turns selecting the book. That's closed now, but I do on Facebook. If you're interested in if you're on Facebook and you're interested in a book group where you can have exchanges with other book lovers, and we even do group reads just about every month, go to Avid Readers Roundtable Discussion Group on Facebook. Avid Readers Roundtable Discussion Group. Let's go to the next one. Nox Imperius, I see that you have lots of old, worn-out books in your library. What do you think about special, anniversary, limited, etc. edition books, which is way too expensive because of the shiny, glamorous, sparkling covers? Isn't it bad that books turn into luxury decoration stuff? You know, I actually like some of those special edition books. You can see my Da Vinci Code illustrated edition right there. I really like that one. I have a Frankenstein illustrated edition too. I like, you know, I would love to have Stephen King's books. Sometimes like a special book manufacturer will make with like leather covers and all this stuff. I really like that kind of stuff. You know, it's interesting when a book becomes a piece of artwork. The 48 Laws of Power, a book that I recently read, is really kind of nice the way it's laid out. It doesn't have a leather cover or anything on it. It just had like red ink and all this stuff. It was unusually formatted, which was what made it beautiful. But, you know, I like special editions in hardbacks. I love those special edition Harry Potters. You know, I'm working on getting the Harry Potter hardbacks right now, but I would really like to have those special edition Harry Potters with all the pictures and all the real nice text and everything. I've got to have those things. They cost a lot. So plus I still have some paperbacks. So the first thing I'm going to do is get all the standard hardbacks in those. Let's keep going here. Colby Fitzsimmons says, what is your experience with Stephen King? Meaning, what was the first book you read by him? And how did you become a constant reader? The first book by King was Desperation. And you know, I became a constant reader with the Dark Tower series. Many years ago, back in 2009 probably, someone that I was acquainted with recommended that I read The Gunslinger by Stephen King. And I had read some King books at that time, but I had heard of the Dark Tower series, didn't know anything about it, and I got hooked on that series. And it was that really pulled me in to Stephen King, was that Dark Tower thing. You know, an epic fantasy reading experience is unlike anything else, other than maybe a science fiction series, because it's just a huge tale that unfolds over thousands of pages, over 1 million words, 2, 3, 4 million words can be in these things. And I was just basically shocked at that kind of experience with the Dark Tower series. And that was what really hooked me on King. That and the first novel I ever read by him, which was Desperation, which I think is one of the most underrated Stephen King books. Angus Johnson, are you into ebooks? I just got a Kobo and love it so far. You know, I am not really into ebooks. I've thought about getting an e-reader. The only reason I haven't is because I like collecting hardbacks. And it's not like I read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books every year. If that were the case, maybe I would. But I can, you know, I like to just pick up hardbacks. I like collecting. I've got my shelves here. So yeah, I might get an e-reader. I might get one. You know, the Paperwhites are like $100 or something, which is fair enough. You know, it's fair enough. But I'm just stuck on buying the hardbacks for now. So I still haven't committed. I'd like to. And sometimes I convince myself that I am going to get an e-reader, but I just like collecting books. You know, collecting books is a hobby of mine, and a Kindle e-reader would basically kill that. So I haven't committed to it yet. Okay, here we go. Michael Stevens. What is the most expensive, valuable book that you own? What Dan Brown book do you recommend that is good as the Da Vinci Code? Love your videos, man. Keep it up. Well, thank you for the compliment. There is no Dan Brown book that's as good as The Da Vinci Code. That's probably the most suspenseful novel that I've ever read. And my most expensive book might be my illustrated Da Vinci here. That probably goes for like 34. Actually, let's look here. A lot of times the price will be on the back. Oh, only $22.95. That might have been some years ago. I actually have this old Webster's Dictionary that might be worth a few bucks here, but I don't have anything that's extraordinarily valuable. I don't have any. Yeah, I have nothing. Oh, actually, I have a pretty nice book. The World of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin. This is a really nice book. I don't know what it would cost, but it's really incredible with the artwork and stuff in it. It's just amazing. Let's look it up and see what it cost. I'll tell you what a brand new one cost. The World of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin book. Okay, so that can't be right. It looks like it's just over $40. So that's probably the nicest book that I own. So I don't own anything that's real nice. I would like to get a Stephen King signed book at some point. I keep entering these contests for those and I keep losing, but I would like to have, I actually have a Dean Koontz signed letter. You know, I don't know if there's any Dean Koontz fans out there, but Dean Koontz answers every single letter that is sent to him. He collects them all. He reads every single one of them, and he will answer them. And you can see that part of it's typed, kind of like a pre-loaded text, but I could tell by the pen that he really wrote it, and he says in it that the signature is really his. So, and I can tell that he actually read my letter because the response correlates with the letter I wrote. He said, "John, thanks for your kind words. You brightened my day." I actually wrote him complimenting him about the Moonlight Bay series that he writes with Christopher Snow. So I have a Dean Koontz signature. However, I would like to get a Stephen King signature. I'd love to get Dean Koontz to come on the show too. I should probably write him a letter and ask him to do that. Let's keep going here. And as far as Dan Brown, I would recommend Inferno's not bad. Give that one a try. However, the Da Vinci Code's the best one by him. The next one is from Evo, if I'm saying that right. Have you read any Richard Lehman books? If not, I suggest the Beast House series to start off with. I have not read Richard Lehman. However, I have heard that author referred to by Stephen King. So, you know, I want to read John MacDonald because King has mentioned him. I've never read one of his books. I actually, not too long ago, picked one of his up just because King has mentioned him. It's a Travis McGee novel, The Dreadful Lemon Sky. You know, many very popular modern best-selling authors have learned from John D. MacDonald. You know, most best-selling authors have a degree in English or journalism or creative writing. And when you're earning a degree like that, you go over a lot of these older successful authors and make a study of their works. And King has studied a lot of these as well as Richard Lehman. So I'll have to finally check one of his out here soon. Andrew Brennan says this: I'm new to this channel, so these questions may have come up before, but here it goes. How many books do you acquire in 1 year? You know, about every few months, I allow myself to do a book purchase, and I'm getting to be due again. The last time I did it, I ordered Charlie the Choo Choo by Stephen King, Faithful by Stephen King, The Institute by Stephen King, and another one by Stephen King that I can't remember. That was the last time I ordered books. So I think maybe here in a couple of weeks, I'll be due for another book order. But I would say I probably come up on 20 or 30 hardbacks per year. So not a whole lot. Do you keep, donate, or sell the books you've finished reading, or some combination? I'm keeping them all now because I'm buying hardbacks. How many books do you read per year? You know, I've been reading more and more consistently every year, and I'm behind now. Just got out of a book slump. one of the previous questions was, how do you break out of a book slump? I had found that I read novels for like 9 straight months, and I was in a slump. I had all these novels started. I just couldn't get into one. So I decided I was going to read some nonfiction. I read The 48 Laws of Power. That was the last book that I finished. And I'm now reading A History of the Nazi Concentration Camps. And this has helped to get me out of that book slump. So I'm going to be going back into reading novels here soon. And I know that most of my viewers here on YouTube prefer when I cover fiction, but I will be reading fiction again soon. So I don't even know why I said that. Let me see here. Where was I? How many books do I read in a year? So like 3 years ago, I started using the Goodreads app, and I read 30 books that year. The following year, I read 40. Last year, I read 50, and this year I'm going for 60, and I'm behind, way behind. I've only completed 7 so far, but I'm still going to try to get there. Where do you get your books? Bookstore, online, library sale. I really liked getting them at the library, but ever since COVID, they don't do the book sale anymore. But I like ordering online, thrift books, stuff like that. I like getting used hardbacks because I can get them pretty cheap and in pretty darn good condition. So I like ordering online because of the selection. And the last question he asks, how and when did you become a reader and book lover? That would be with Goosebumps and the Babysitters Club when I was younger. Matthew Cossey, have you ever tried writing your own fiction stories? I actually had 2 ideas that I thought, man, these would make good fiction stories. However, I just can't write worth a damn. Actually, I have a book. Of course, I didn't bring it out. It's like the Random House Guide to Good Writing is exactly what it is that I'd like to read. Plus, I think it could help me to write better video scripts. I don't always script the videos out, but I at least make an outline. And I think if I could become a better writer, I could become a better video content producer with structure and things like that. But the one story, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the classic Flowers for Algernon, but in that story, there's this little guy. He's like a really mentally handicapped guy, not very intelligent, right? Real low IQ type guy. And they do an experiment on this guy scientifically, and he rockets up to become a genius. He's like the Isaac Newton now. And then I'll say no more. I don't want to spoil the plot, but I had a similar idea about this guy, that a normal guy out running up these steps as part of his workout, and he hits his head and he becomes like highly intelligent, like what happens with Flowers for Algernon. And he becomes too smart, and he becomes to realize too much truth about reality, and it drives him crazy. That was one idea I had. That's probably the only one worth mentioning. So the answer is no. I have never tried to write my own fiction stories. Well, I did once, but it didn't come together. Maybe I'll try it again in the future. If I read that Random House book, maybe I'll be able to do it. Let's see here. Zach asks, how many visits per week to the library? More live library videos. Thanks. There will be more videos coming of me in the library. But, before COVID hit, I went over there at least a few times a week. The librarians know me. I used to film this program in the library before I had my own bookshelf here. I used to sit in one of the quiet rooms, and you could see my background was the library. You could see, it was a really good background. But, we were actually going to start a philosophy club at my local public library. I helped to get that started right before the first meeting COVID hit, and they shut it down. So I've only been going to the library like maybe once a month. I did go and get the book that I'm reading now on the concentration camps, but haven't been going that often. Red Vitamin Blue says, looking forward to the 5K event. Your hard work and dedication has created a great channel and community. And since you're A, Stephen King fan, and B, my own journey to the tower is almost over, I got thinking, what if Roland's quartet were different? Who else from the King multiverse would make great palaver with the gunslinger? Would the journey to the tower play out differently with other characters? Or does Ka behave like water disturbed by a falling pebble? Does it always correct itself in the end? Anyway, before I go too far down the rabbit hole, my question for you is, if you could choose any Stephen King characters besides Eddie, Jake, and Susanna for adult Roland's quartet, who would you pick and why? The Dark Tower series has a very unusual ending for a series. Many people hated that ending. I hated it. It's grown on me over time, but I really like Wireman from Duma Key. Wireman is a character that would fit in well, I think, with the quartet. He's kind of a secondary character, but I just loved him. I want more of his character. I would really like to see Jerome Wireman. I think that Carrie could be a great contribution to Roland's quest for the tower. The little girl in Firestarter would do quite well on Roland's journey for the tower, but for some reason, Jerome Wireman's coming up. Jerome Wireman wasn't exactly a violent guy, but I think that he could play a good role. And I'll leave it at that. I don't know how close you are to the ending, so I'd better leave it at that. Jack Sawyer would be another one. Jack Sawyer does have his role in the tower. Sawyer has his hand in that tower. If you ever read Black House, you'll see that he does. But it would be interesting to see Jack Sawyer accompany the quartet directly. We're almost done here, guys. Juan Martinez, what's the highest price you ever paid for a book? And that would have been a dictionary that I bought once for $50. Question, what electronic device would you recommend best for reading? Kindle, iPad, which works best for you? I don't read ebooks, but I do like the idea behind the Kindle with the paperwhite. I've actually read a Sherlock Holmes book on my phone once. And it's hard to actually look directly into something that's a bright screen for an hour or 2 hours. God forbid you did it for 3 or 4 hours. So I like the idea of the Paperwhite, and I would recommend that. The Kindle Paperwhite really seems to be great. And if I were to buy one, and when I do buy one, I'm going to get a Kindle Paperwhite. So let's keep going here. The final chapter asks, when did you start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I'm going to talk a lot about that in my upcoming book review of Jiu-Jitsu University by Saulo Ribeiro. But I started about 8 months ago, and I'm starting to finally build some skill and whatnot. And it's a very intriguing sport. I'm 180 pounds, and I like grappling against people that are 250, 300 pounds. I try to crush those guys that are real big like that. And I have, and I've lost to them as well. But it's a really interesting journey with that. I even read a book on it. I read one called, I'm reading one now, like I mentioned, but I read a different one called Zen Jiu-Jitsu from White to Black, or from White to Blue, or something like that. It was kind of like a philosophical take on the sport of jiu-jitsu, but I've been at it for about 8 months. I really think that I'm going to be dangerous by the time I've been doing it for a couple of years. So there you go. Thornston asks, he actually says, I recommend the book Planet of the Apes. It's about 90% different than the movie. The only thing I'll say about that is I'd really like to read the book The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I read The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and I want to read that Island of Dr. Moreau. I remember the movie when I was a kid, just a little bit of the movie. It was a real weird shit going on in that, but I don't remember the plot close enough. I just want to read the novel. I don't think the fact that I watched the movie 30 years ago is going to ruin the novel for me. So, yeah, I want to read that one. And I'll have to check out The Planet of the Apes. I didn't even know that was a book. I knew it was a television series, old black and white thing, but I'll have to look into that. David asks a question that's already been asked. Which city created by King would you like to live in? I would go with Midworld for that one. I would also go with Castle Rock. It would really be interesting. Wouldn't that be interesting? Maybe they could do it with virtual reality. Virtual realities are getting better and better with time. That would be interesting, to take a trip to Castle Rock and stop by Needful Things. I'd like to meet the characters there. That's one of King's classic cities. Pop Merrill, I'd like to meet. If you don't know who Pop Merrill is, he was in The Sundog, which is a prelude to Needful Things, which is found in 4 Past Midnight. But I really like Castle Rock, but I would go with Midworld on that one, the epic. It looks like I've only got 2 left, and hopefully I'm not leaving any out here. I'm pretty sure that I didn't. Ron Davis, how much do you read each day? I actually read for about 1 to 1.5 hours each day. And I have one more here, guys. Actually, you know what? I'll pull up on the app just to make sure I didn't leave anyone out here. Plus someone answered since I printed this out. So let's see here. The very first question would be this. Okay, so I'm lost. So there's one more here. And the person asked, if somehow I missed a question, please forgive me. Yeah, do you like TJ was another question. And the answer to that is I'm not sure what that's referring to. So I'm not sure that I can answer that one. Looks like I did get every question, but I've got one more. This one says, tell me your top 10 sci-fi novels, and the person's name's cut off. So I'm looking here to see what that person's name is, because I want to get every single one of these. I'm going on here. It must be towards the top. Ah, yeah, it is. It's the very last one. We have arrived here at the last one. Evo asks, what are your top 10 science fiction novels? And that's a tough question for me to answer. I will say that I liked Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Man, I thought that was just a really, really good book. And an unusually weird, funny kind of book, but when it comes to science fiction, actually, I also liked, okay, so here's my science fiction recommendations. Timeline by Michael Crichton. It's about a college professor that accidentally uses quantum technology to shoot himself into the past. He goes way back into the past, and his students have to try to figure out how they're going to get him back. And I thought that was a great book. You know, Michael Crichton was really the master you take a little bit of kind of like history, you take a little bit of quantum science, and you've got a Michael Crichton novel. And I liked Timeline. And I also liked the time travel novel by Stephen King called 11/22/63. It's an incredible story about a man who goes back in time in an attempt to prevent the John F. Kennedy assassination. But there's a catch. You see, Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. The time warp goes back to 1958. So our protagonist has to go back to 1958, live for 5 years, and then make an attempt on the Kennedy assassination. So it's a really interesting time travel novel. I also recommend Under the Dome by Stephen King. That's another science fiction book that I thought was really good. That's not space opera. My highest science fiction recommendation, though, would go to, I'll mention A Wrinkle in Time, too. If you like children's books or YA, A Wrinkle in Time, I read it for the first time last year. Thought it was really good. I like Alastair Reynolds' Revelation Space. Since this is the last question, I might as well grab them off the shelf. Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. It all starts with the very first book in the core trilogy, Revelation Space itself. This is a very deeply imaginative novel that just has these very intelligent, cunning ideas about consciousness and machines and science and spaceships. It's just crazy. It's crazy. That's the first book. The second book in the core trilogy is Redemption Arc. And the third book, all three of these I read last year for the first time. This is the best science fiction book I've ever read by a long shot. Absolution Gap, which is the third piece of the Revelation Space core trilogy, and it's incredible. However, there's a fourth book. It's not technically part of the trilogy, but it does fit right on in there, almost making it a quartet. Chasm City, the first science fiction novel I ever read when I was about 15 or 17 years old. This is an incredible book, and it's almost time for a reread on this one. So these are four pieces that are at the heart of this epic. It's the science fiction version of an epic fantasy story, basically. It's this huge space opera. And there are other books that are involved with this as well. This is two novellas, Diamond Dog's Turquoise Days. They're part of the Revelation Space world. The Prefect is set in Revelation Space. Elysium Fire, Revelation Space. This is a different one. House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. You know what? Another recommendation by Reynolds that I'll give you is Century Reign. Century Reign is really interesting. It merges two genres. On the one hand, we have a 1959 nor private detective type story, right? Something almost Agatha Christie-like. No science fiction involved, just an old detective mystery. And then we have this futuristic space opera, distant space opera world, right? And a wormhole opens up between these two places, the old detective mystery genre and the space opera genre. They come together with a wormhole, and I thought that it was really imaginative. I also have another book in this series that's in the other room. I'm working on it now. It's called Galactic North, which is a book of short stories that are revelation space. The story actually ends there, chronologically speaking. And here's another book by Reynolds. There's a story in this one called Monkey Suit that is revelation space. And Reynolds I think just now published another one in the revelation space world. So when it comes to science fiction, this is what I recommend. If you want the science fiction version of an epic fantasy series, I highly recommend Revelation Space by Alastair Reynolds. It really is incredible. And Reynolds is a physicist. He's extremely knowledgeable about science and physics. He's an astronomer. So it just works out well with the science in these books. It's really interesting. All these quantum crazy stuff going on. It's just really interesting. And it's not some old far-fetched shit because the man really does know what he's talking about. So I think that this is really good and I highly recommend it. And that is it, guys. So yeah, we made it to 5,000 subscribers and I answered every question in the video. You know, guys, it really is a pleasure for me to do this channel because I like reading. And I read, no one cares about what I read, right? I don't have anyone to talk to it about, especially with the library closed. So I like coming on here and filming out my thoughts, not only with book reviews, but recommendation videos and author interviews and interviews with people that like to read. And I like reading the comments. You know, we're finally, after 3.5 years, we're finally starting to get a little bit of recognition from the YouTube algorithm. So we're looking forward now to the 10,000 subscriber mark. Maybe we'll get there way faster than we got the first 5,000. But we've been on for over an hour now, and it is time for me to go. I've actually got to eat dinner. I'm having vegan tacos. I'm going to go outside and feed the stray cats that I support. And then I'm going to go work on my concentration camp book for a while. I'm going to break halfway in it tonight. You know, I want to get through this piece of nonfiction. I want to try to get the author on and interview him about that book here on the channel so that I can get back to reading some fiction. I've got to get through the 5th Dresden Files book. I've got to get through Galactic North, which is part of this. I read 2 stories in it and stopped. I've got to finish that book. I've got to finish Different Seasons by Stephen King. You see, I had all these fiction books started. I was in a reading slump, and I just couldn't get through anything. And now that I'm past that, reading some nonfiction, 48 Laws of Power and the concentration camp thing, I'm ready to jump back in. And I'm going to finish those books I had started before I move on into Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. So thanks for the support, guys. I've said enough. Oh, and keep your eyes out. Monday, I'm going to be doing an interview with another YouTuber named Michael Nip. We're going to talk about the epic fantasy genre and why it's so great and what beginners might want to pick up if they're just getting into that thing. So once again, thank you all. This channel means the world to me, and keep your eye out for upcoming content. See you later.